Hi there, I'm Matthew Lester from the Rhodes Business School. This is a short video intervention called The Inconvenient Truth and some immediate solutions pursuant to getting things going on the fees must fall issue. These are my views and not the views of the Davis Tax Committee. Let's set the scene. Perhaps this is just the end of the beginning. Students will go on holiday to return next year when fees must fall will get going again, and we are wanting something to get in place so that hopefully universities can get back to work next year. We are in a desperate position with regard to finances in South Africa. We have spent the last year stabilizing the national debt trajectory. There is little extra around, certainly not enough to pay for free fees for everybody. If one goes to the National Development Plan, we find that they said that there would be 58 million South Africans by 2030. Actually, the population is growing much faster. We are looking at about 64 million being here by 2030, and the bulk of the problem being the growing, bulging middle that don't receive grants, they don't receive financial assistance. And the Fees Must Fall campaign must be looked into in the context that once one goes beyond the age of 18 in South Africa, we don't get much financial assistance. However, National Treasury's estimates are that if we implement the policy ideas of Lutuli House, we see in the expenditure trajectory in red there, way above the revenue trajectory in grey. We cannot afford the interventions that are on the cards at the moment. National Treasury has admitted this, particularly with regard to NHI, vocational training, and public works. And they are saying, as we are before Fees Must Fall comes along, we are only looking at the options of acceleration of economic growth. That's not happening. Increases in the structural level of taxation. That's already happening without Fees Must Fall. Or shifting resources from other priorities. That's a very thorny one. So when we go to Fees Must Fall, what we've got so far is that we've got a quick decision to get a 0% fee increase through with no idea or financial plan to back it up. And it will cost government about 3 billion rand a year. A total cost of free tertiary education for everybody would therefore be in the region of about 50 billion rand a year. Important in this is that we have got a 0% fee increase for all, and that does not make for good economic policy. The Davis Committee has been looking at papers on this as targeted interventions, for example with regard to VAT. And what we have seen is that when one grants a general exemption, one gives the exemption to the highest deciles as well. And Janssen and Karlitz from Stellenbosch have been saying that the wealthiest do not only benefit from zero ratings of food, for example, in some items they benefit significantly more than the poor. And this underscores Keynes' reminder that the most of the benefit of reduced indirect taxes actually accrues to the better off, making this poorly targeted way of pursuing equity objectives. The same principles would apply in the context of free fees for everybody at tertiary education level. So let's look at the work of Thomas Piketty. He recently came to South Africa, and let's see what he had to say. He produces a slide which shows USA college attendance versus parent income. And what you see with this is very important. You see that at the lower levels of income, fewer children go to college. That must be even more acute in South Africa. So what you are needing is direct financial intervention where parents are poor. You might need something in the middle, but when one gets to the top levels, we find that the wealthy already have their children in education, they can afford it. And so the system can't afford to subsidize that further. And I think in the context of Fees Must Fall, what we must be saying is, sorry, no intervention up the top, maybe something in the middle, but definitely we need direct targeted intervention for the poor. Now, direct intervention at the moment comes from national student funding schemes, which are clearly not working. So the suggestion is to go towards allocating funds to student aid arrangements that are effected at university level. Then, as part of the transformation of universities, we can let all stakeholders of universities determine the distribution of the direct intervention. Obviously, that should be subject to National Treasury guidelines. And that's a great ideal, but where do we get the funding from? So let's now turn to looking for money. There's your national budget for 2016 with the three major taxes. We are probably looking at a personal tax increase next year anyway. That is already going to put a lot of stress on parents and everybody. The next one up is the VAT issue. We would have to increase VAT by 2% to pay for free tertiary education for all. It's not a prospect. The corporate sector on their tax bill is already ailing, and increasing the corporate tax rate is really not an option at this stage. So by process of elimination, we land up looking at the skills development levy, that's 15 billion rand, and to see whether there's more that we can do with that system. A lot of people are looking at this. At present, the SETAs of South Africa are funded to the extent of 1% of payroll. That collects 15 billion rand per annum from employers. Then one has to ask the question, where does it go? Now, I got this from the FASSET website. Their SDL arrives. 20% of it is hived off into the National Skills Fund. 80% is then on pass to the SETA. They keep 10.5% of that for their living expenses, let's say, and the remainder goes out in grants. So we've got levy coming in, siphon off a bit of skills levy, pay for the SETAs, and then the grants continue. What you see in this is, in order to finance the National Skills Fund, the mandatory grants of the SETAs in 2012 were dropped from 50% to 20%. So the idea must surely be to say at the moment, hey, why not increase the SETA levies and push more directly through to the National Skills Fund? That's obviously where government will go. But let's take that a little bit further and say the obvious solution is obviously to increase the SDL levy, but that's going to be a slow process, and there are lots of considerations regarding efficiency in that. But did you know this? South African universities pay about 750 million rand a year in SDL. So the simple suggestion is to say, from 1 March 2016, exempt South African universities from paying SDL. Take the 750 million rand saving, which will exist in their financial accounts, and put that directly to student aid. That will get us going. That could pay, by my calculations, 25,000 bursaries to help poor students. That's at least a start. Then you go over to the Department of Labour, where they have the UIF fund, which has a surplus of 90 billion rand, which grew by 10 billion rand in 2014. Now, surely there's logic to the idea that if we have more graduates, that is in the interest of the UIF fund, because they'll pay more UIF levy without claiming it. So, we can say, use the surplus for the benefit of the students, or some of it, or we can say, use the surplus as a bargaining chip. And this is where one goes over to the private sector, and we look at the financial institutions who, according to various reports, are sitting on excess cash reserves of about 500 billion rand. And they don't want to lend that on to students because the risk profile of a student simply isn't good, and that doesn't justify lending. But how about if we went about it differently? We say, banks, you provide the loan mechanisms for the students on a massive scale, and the UIF fund will provide the guarantees for the student facilities. In this way, we would be using the benefits of the Department of Labour and the financial institutions in South Africa to really get something going. So what we're looking at the moment is we can come up with, by February next year, direct and immediate financial interventions. That's the first solution. What can we do in the middle with a reduced intervention? My idea on this is to say, go to section 10(1)(q) of the Income Tax Act, which deals with bursaries. It says, generally a bursary granted by an employer is a fringe benefit, but we create exemptions in terms of section 10(1)(q). The principal exemption is that if you pay a bursary on behalf of an employee, then we can pay an unlimited tax-free bursary. And that's useful if you've got employees, but not students. However, where we have siblings of employees, the children of employees, we can grant a tax-free bursary of up to 30,000 Rand per annum if that employee earns less than 250,000 Rand per annum. Now, if you take that, it looks generous, but it isn't. Because what one needs to do is say, mine into it. And we go into the tax brackets and we find, well, you might get a 26% discount on fees if you earn below 250,000 Rand per annum. But if, with the mere stroke of the legislation pen in next year's budget, we say, increase the threshold for tax-free bursaries provided by employers to 500,000 Rand per annum, that would mean that we can pay bursaries up to 30,000, maybe we could make that more, by employers on behalf of employees, thereby substantially discounting their fees. Now, what I really like about that is it involves the private sector in what we're doing. There's proper enforcement of what we are doing. And we are coming to the party with some money to help the middle working class of South Africa. So, in short, my proposals are direct interventions at the lower level, and that's primarily funded through the SETAs. And then in the middle level, we can use section 10(1)(q) to help parents along a bit. And if you earn over 500,000 Rand per year, I'm sorry, South Africa can't afford to grant you free fees for all at tertiary education level. I'm Matthew Lester at the Rhodes Business School. If you'd like to contact me, please do so. I think we can make a big difference on this before February next year. Thank you for your attention.